Hey,
come on, Greg.
Take this shit.
Chris, do you hear me, Chris? Chris.
I knew this kid, Chris Gregg, who was born in the gutter. He was beaten by his father and despised by his mother, and was born into a world he knew he could never know, and infected with a parasite that would forever grow. At an early age, starting eating into his mind, and corruption wasn't much, just feeding into the swine, beating into his mind. He was lonely and cold, and the physical was gone, cause it was only his soul. But even that would be missed. Outside he was Chris, popping pills and smoking meth, but he was slitting his wrist. When he never had a home, he thought nobody cared, and he would talk to himself, but there was nobody there. Inside he would tear, and there lived Greg, a cynical criminal, snorting 8 balls to the head, living on the streets, lighting up cigarette butts. Dirty needles that he would find, he was picking them up. Kids with money after school, he was sticking them up. If he got heroin money, he was living it up, and everybody called him Chris, but he knew who he was. On the inside he was Greg, and it was fucking him up. So he went into a rage, throwing shots at his brother, and just to get money for drugs, he was robbing his mother, fucking the others, saying he was living to die, but in reality he was just living in his mind. And he was stuck inside a cage, suffered and trapped. When he was loving the world, it wasn't loving him back, so he fell inside a hole that was covered and sealed, and just to get some air to breathe, he was bucking his steel. Now how the fuck does it feel to be dead and alive, and every thought you ever had inside your head was a lie? So Chris cocked back the hammer with one last breath, he cried to God, and in that moment Chris killed Greg. I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind. Shit, I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind. On the other hand, this kid Greg Chris was the smartest nigga ever. How did he get sick? A straight A student turned into a criminal mind, started busting off shells within a minimal time, causing problems in his family, abandoned from his peeps. Then he struck his own mother and was ran into the streets. He ran into some beef, bought himself a 9, but really in his mind he thought he bought himself some time. He caught him at the park, he popped the motherfucker until he found out that he shot his own brother. Looked into his mind and blamed it on Chris, but he told us it was Greg that was making him miss. Now he's taking a trip, locked up for a century, dreamed to be a teacher when he was in elementary. Too much professional ability, flushed it down the drain in the correctional facility. Locked down, talking in the yard, how he cocaine started and bumped it up the hard, so niggas started beating him and taking all his clothes, and he was fighting anyone, so they would take him to the hole, making him a hoe or taking him a joke. He conjured up a plan to put a belt around his throat, so he waited, took a little minute before he could pull it off. They said he had a visit. Through the glass, it was his girl, and he felt like a meteor had just hit his world. Through the line of the telephone, she had said, I was having your baby, but now it's dead. He stood up and told the guards to take him to a cell, cause at that moment right there, he thought it's better in hell. So he tied that belt around his neck real quick and jumped off the bed, and that's how Greg killed Chris. I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind. Shit, I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind. I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind. I don't know how the story begun. Are we 1 and 2, or are we 2 people in one? Still lost in the time, but we're both intertwined, walking on a line of corruption in the mind.